Singularity.
My name is Nicola and you're watching Singularity One-on-One. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, you can show your support by either writing a brief review on iTunes or by simply making a donation. Today, my guest on the show is the author of the Quantum Thief Trilogy, Hannu Rajaniemi. Welcome, Hannu. I'm so happy to have you on my show.
Thank you, Nicola. Very pleased to be here.
Fantastic. So before we begin our conversation today, I would like to make an announcement, and that would be that we are going to give away 3 books today to our audience, and those are the books. It's the third part of the trilogy called The Causal Angel. And those books will be given away to the best tweets or best quotes on under the YouTube video. So if you guys actually pay attention and write some of the quotes that you find interesting during this conversation with Hannu, I will be very happy to send you a book. Now, unfortunately, we are limited to sending those books mainly to the continental United States, but I will make an exception on one of them, and the third one I can send anywhere across the world on my own expenditure. So, with that, without further ado, let's just jump right in. Hannu, can you please introduce yourself and what you do for those of our viewers who may not be familiar with your work?
Okay, so my name is Hannu Rajaniemi. I'm originally from Finland, as you may or may not be able to guess from the name, but I have actually lived for the last 13 years in the UK. My background is in mathematics and theoretical physics, so I studied mathematics in University of Oulu and also University of Cambridge, and did my PhD on string theory. Around the same time, I started writing science fiction, so initially some short stories and later on the novels that Nicola mentioned, so starting with The Quantum Thief and its sequels, The Fractal Prince and The Causal Angel, which to my delight and surprise have been very well received. Along the way, I also co-founded a mathematics research company, which called Think Tank Maths, which solved some industrial mathematics problems across a variety of sectors, sort of ranging from space to life sciences to the financial services and many other things. And after that, I, amongst other things, attended Singularity University last year. So I'm a graduate of the Singularity University GSP 13 program. As a result of that, I've gotten involved with another company called Helix Nanotechnologies, which is trying to do some quite exciting things with DNA. So currently I divide my time between that and writing more books, and I'm working on sort of the first book beyond the Quantum Thief Trilogy at the moment, which we can also talk about later.
Wow, you even preempted a bunch of my questions here. So let me take it step by step though, and take one issue at a time. So you mentioned that you have a PhD in mathematics. More specifically, that's in string theory. So let me ask you: are you first and foremost a mathematician, a physicist, or a sci-fi author?
I guess it's question that is becoming increasingly hard to answer. I mean, I kind of find myself existing in this funny quantum superposition of doing many things. Now, I guess my training certainly is in mathematics, and I mean, string theory, of course, is very much concerned with the physical world as well, or tries to be. So it tries to be a theory of quantum gravity and explain some fundamental aspects of the universe. But it is also, and we can talk about whether it's successful in that or not, but it is also the area where mathematics and physics really collide and interact, and so I guess my mathematical work was really getting some inspiration from pure mathematics and trying to generalize those concepts to solve some problems that come up in string theory. Now after my PhD, I then very much sort of became a combination of an entrepreneur and a more applied mathematician. So my mathematical work was more oriented towards the kinds of problems that came up in the sectors I described. But then there was also this element of doing all the things that are necessary to build a company. Where I think being involved in a startup, you cannot be one thing at all, but you need to do whatever is necessary, whether it's sort of cleaning the offices when before important clients show up, or working on the technical side, or recruiting people, or helping staff and researchers with their issues, or trying to sell research projects to clients. So that sort of phase certainly, I think, took away from me any single defining word I could come up with. I guess writing is sort of very much at the moment what I'm known for. I think most people would associate me with being a science fiction writer, and it's certainly very important to me. I mean, I think writing becomes like this inner need that one has to satisfy. I think most writers would sort of subscribe to that view. But it's sort of not the only thing I want to do. I mean, I want to keep doing things which are in some connection to real life science and technology. And so the current startup very much gives that opportunity to also try to understand new problem domains. So in this case, biology, and obviously with a certain mathematical computational bent to it as well. But yeah, so
Yes, I actually wanted to ask you to start backwards and tell us about the most recent engagement of yours with Helix nanotechnology. Can you tell us about what it is about and what's the project? I mean, you're a fellow Singularity University alumni like me, and I'm curious to find out more about your project.
okay, so I mean, we're obviously at a very early stage and somewhat stealthy about what we do. So I'll be a little bit cryptic on on what it's actually about. But I think at a high level, you could say that we're trying to work on a system that you could call a sort of like a black box or a flight recorder for a living cell. So a system that you can put inside a cell that monitors what is happening inside and writes information about what's going on onto a synthetic DNA tape. So sort of molecular tape recorder, if you like. And the reason why this is interesting is that measuring what goes on inside biological systems at that kind of single cell level is currently extremely hard and extremely expensive. And actually, even sort of the modern sort of systems that quantify the presence of RNA molecules or DNA sequencing and so on, they really take snapshots, frozen snapshots of what the system looks like at a particular point in time. But as we know, biological systems are very complex and dynamic and constantly evolving and interacting. So we're trying to create a better way to essentially capture what happens over time. So hence the kind of recorder approach, where you use DNA to store information about multiple time points that can be read all at once.
So going backwards in time, perhaps you can be a little less cryptic about your previous company, where it was a mathematics company, right?
That's right. So it really started together with I started together with Sam Halliday, who also did his PhD in string theory in Edinburgh, and it was really Sam's idea, I would say. So we both towards the end of our PhD started to get a little bit disillusioned about the academic world, or sort of we started to have some doubts whether we wanted to spend our lives doing string theory and working on things where maybe 10 other people in the world understood and cared about. And we discovered that we both shared some heroes, like people like John von Neumann and Alan Turing, who, although very purely mathematically trained, had sort of applied their skills in solving some very important real life problems very successfully. So we tried out sort of we through an academic conference we went to, we came into contact with Motorola and did a piece of work for them on sort of mobile network frequency allocation. And so that was a very successful project, and it sort of convinced us that there could be an actual business in mathematical problem solving, and it was the kind of job we wanted, which didn't seem to exist. So we decided to create it, and so then essentially we did sort of the initial hard slog of trying to find some initial clients. We also had a stroke of luck in that well, our team was sort of joined by a very experienced business person who became our CEO, who had a lot of sales experience and business leadership experience. So that was very helpful, and we then got some traction in various domains, sort of from as I mentioned, from sort of the space sector to the oil and gas sector, to some work also for the UK Ministry of Defence on some sort of DARPA-style research projects, you could say.
So let me ask you about that a little bit here, because, of course, Alan Turing is a hero of mine too, and he's perhaps, well, he's known for a number of things, but one of the things for sure is his sort of breaking of the German Enigma codes for the U-boats during World War II. And I think one of his colleagues said that that Alan Turing, without, what did he say? He said something in the sense that we didn't win the war because of Alan, but without him we might have lost it.
Yeah,
something in that sense. So, but going to code breaking, and you've mentioned DARPA and the UK Ministry of Defence. Recently, there have been a huge backlash in the math community against doing work for the NSA, for the UK Ministry of Defence. I mean, you can give like sort of fictional examples, such as the movie The Good Will Hunting, or you can actually give some real life examples of very well-known mathematicians who actually went out on the public record to call for other mathematicians to refuse to work and do contract work for the NSA and other such institutions. How do you feel about that?
So I can certainly understand these people's position. I should elaborate on sort of the connection that my previous company had to UK MOD, in the sense that we never really did much work on cryptography. In fact, so the UK institution that corresponds to NSA is GCHQ, and we never really had much association with them. And the projects we worked on were actually much more. They were essentially fundamental research projects that the Ministry of Defence was funding in the interests of sort of building some national capability in areas like artificial intelligence and quantum computing. So the sort of, it wasn't really a question of breaking codes or even sort of creating operational systems, but really quite fundamental research. Now I think the larger question of the sort of engagement of mathematicians and the intelligence community is very interesting. I mean, as you say, that connection goes way back. It certainly goes back to the beginning of the 20th century, and the sort of war efforts of Enigma and the sort of US Bletchley Park, the US equivalent of that, Magic, which was about breaking the Japanese codes, are interesting examples of that. And I think the sort of mathematicians do have a tendency, perhaps, to become very enamored by difficult problems, and especially pure mathematicians. And it's somewhat remarkable, actually, that really modern foundations of modern cryptography have ended up coming from sort of rather obstruse, difficult branches of pure mathematics. I mean, number theory and things like that, theory of finite fields. So I can kind of understand the fascination that this might create for a lot of mathematicians. That there's this lure that my work could actually be so meaningful on such a large scale. But now I think perhaps. Perhaps mathematicians are starting to realize with these revelations what the big impact really has been. And I think even though those of us who have an interest in technology and history of intelligence operations, I'm sure have long surmised that there must be large scale information gathering going on. But I think even in spite of that, I think even people in the know were somewhat surprised by this enormous scale of the revelation. So I think this is really one of the great questions of our age, on how we're going to deal with the fact that modern technology simply gives sort of centralized organizations enormous leverage in terms of gathering information. And I think, I mean, I certainly find even, and not necessarily even just the context of government intelligence agencies, but also companies and sort of private organizations who also hold vast stores of personal data.
Yeah, and of course, the UK capabilities would probably be second best only to the NSA itself. Uh, and naturally, Canada would be somewhere third or fourth. But let me ask you about this then. So that, I mean, we know that any knowledge, any math or science could be used for both good and evil. So that's why I believe ethics comes to play such an important role. Would you mind saying a little bit about ethics and whether or how you think it's important in making those decisions?
Well, I think, yeah, I
Because
think it's
mathematicians often tend to ignore, I think, ethics, or sort of, as you mentioned, they get enamored or really sucked into that very tough mathematical problem, and then they kind of fail to look at, you know, the picture down the road or how it can be utilized later on.
Yeah, I think that's right. So the and I think maybe mathematicians now are particularly prone to that problem, given that most of pure mathematics is kind of far removed from reality. Now, I think the question of ethics and science is becoming incredibly important, and I think the sort of one of my favorite books is The Making of the Atomic Bomb by Richard Rhodes, which sort of chronicles how people, including sort of Leo Szilard, who kind of originated a lot of the key concepts like chain reaction, struggled with these issues. So I think maybe there needs to be there should be even more kind of directed efforts to create that debate and actually make scientists alongside their work aware of these questions. So I think actually something that may be related to is that in many countries there is this issue of two cultures, scientists kind of neglecting humanities and vice versa. So maybe introducing a bit of ethics and philosophy into the science curriculum to actually force people to think about these questions might be quite relevant. Another point, of course, is that that one of the things that science fiction tries to do is, to some extent, to imagine some scenarios where scientific advances change sort of the human experience in society in very, very fundamental ways. It may not. I don't think it's necessarily providing answers to what should be done, but at least highlighting the sort of enormity of the changes that might result.
Mm-hmm. We're going to come back to the science fiction part of it, but let me ask you this then, because it's a little bit relevant here, I think. How is it and why? You mentioned that you got a little disillusioned with academia. How is it and why did this happen? What was sort of the sort of awareness that built within you after spending 5 years of your life doing a PhD or so on?
Well, I mean, I enjoyed my PhD a lot. I had a lot of freedom to do my research and come up with new ideas, and I had a very good mentor in my supervisor. But then when I sort of started to think about how the academic path would unfold further on, it was clear that, especially in a field like string theory, the competition for postdoc positions was just enormously difficult. I mean, many of my peers, even some of the very talented ones, would send out 30, 40 applications for a postdoc position and maybe get one interview out of that. And then of course, projecting further, you would essentially have to work extremely hard to produce essentially a little small push into this unknown, which of course is valuable and needs to be done, but in sort of contrast of trying to maybe do something more applied or widely relevant to the real world, it didn't suddenly seem so attractive. I think another point was that both Sam and I started really have some doubts with string theory as a subject, in terms of being slightly concerned that perhaps it sort of didn't fulfill the promises had made sort of about 10, 15 years earlier as the great theory of everything. And I think there is a sort of a spreading concern in the physics community now more widely along those lines that that string theory has kind of lost all contact with experiment, and it's really become this very complex, abstract mathematical theory that is not really able to make significant experimental predictions, at least at this point. Yet it is also attracting quite a big chunk of the theoretical physics or mathematical physics funding, whereas there might be other directions that should be explored as well.
Is that connected in any way with the Higgs boson discovery and CERN and the exact measurement of its value?
I mean, that's a slightly different story. So I guess the sort of what the Higgs and the LHC work relate to much more is the standard model, which is sort of the unifying framework of the fundamental interactions of nature, which without including gravity. I mean, that's sort of so the a very and the standard model is a very beautiful theory that elegantly sort of combines our understanding about electromagnetism and the weak and strong nuclear forces, and kind of the missing element there was the Higgs, which now appears to have been confirmed at sort of roughly speaking the right mass as well. So string theory, on the other hand, tries to go beyond the standard model. So it tries to bring gravity into the same quantum mechanical framework. The sort of fundamental question there being that the techniques that were used to kind of understand the other fundamental forces and to create sort of quantum theories of electromagnetism and the nuclear forces don't seem to work with gravity. Gravity seems to be a different beast somehow to the compared to the other forces, and the sort of great challenge of creating a quantum theory of gravity is what both string theory and other approaches like loop quantum gravity have been struggling with for the last few decades. So the problem there is that the energy scales required to probe quantum gravity phenomena are so vast that they may not be within the reach of LHC or indeed of any conceivable particle accelerator that we could ever build. There might be some ways that we could use cosmological observations also to constrain some of these models of physics, but it's not entirely clear yet how to do that.
One of the implications pertaining somewhat to your work was that, the way I understand it, the value measured of the Higgs boson was very important. And I think, if I remember, if it was in the 140 MeV range, it would have meant more of a multiverse implications. It would kind of be a confirmation of the multiverse hypothesis. And if it was under 120 or 115, it would have been a denial of it. But it kind of came up like somewhere exactly in between, at 125 to 126, somewhere like between 125 and 126 MeV. And I don't know, because you do speak about the multiverse in your books. I mean, do those discoveries and those measurements and those experimental tests have an impact on your writing?
Well, I think not perhaps directly. I mean, in terms of, I don't think anything I've written has changed as a result of LHC discoveries. But I think when we use the word multiverse, we kind of have to be careful on which multiverse we mean. I mean, there are actually many possible ways of thinking about the possibility of other universes as well. So the sort of we have. In quantum mechanics, we have the many worlds interpretation, the idea that whenever a physical process happens, all the possible branches of the wave function, all the possible ways in which an outcome could occur actually occur. Sort of this idea of going back to the 1950s, creating so that we would have this infinitely branching multiversal tree. So that's one meaning of the word multiverse. I think what you're referring to is probably more related to this sort of cosmological multiverse, where sort of there are models, for example, originated by Russian cosmologist Andrei Linde, like called eternal inflation, where sort of our universe is just sort of this locally expanding region of a much vaster space, and it could be that the sort of the constants, the kinds of constants like the mass of the Higgs are different in different parts of those
and totally
that
random.
region. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that relates to the idea of the anthropic principle, which is that which I'm sure you're familiar with, where the sort of we wonder, we can look around and wonder sort of how fine-tuned the universe seems to be in terms of many of the physical constants, like possibly the mass of the Higgs, but also others like the so-called fine structure constant. If it was even a little bit different, we wouldn't have stars or life or anything else interesting, but it seems to be just right. So the anthropic interpretation of these observations is that actually there are other regions in this sort of cosmological inflatory multiverse where there are different values for these constants, and therefore there is no life to open its eyes and look around and be surprised by the fine tuning. So yeah, that there is that. I guess that there are, just to kind of conclude the tour of the multiverses, I mean, there are also other notions in that have come out of string theory in the sort of cosmological context, so-called brain world scenarios, where there are sort of not only other regions of the multiverse, but actually sort of other dimensions, sort of orthogonal to ours, where excuse me, where universes are actually like these stacked sheets, separated in this sort of additional dimensional extensions that we cannot access, but which could also have separate laws of physics on each membrane or brain.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm slowly creeping out of my depth here, so let me get a little more closer to a few subjects that I'm more familiar with myself. So let me ask you to move our conversation to science fiction. What is science fiction in your view? What is your definition of science fiction?
I think my definition of science fiction is sort of relates to the application of the scientific method in some way. So quite often I mean, this is one of those questions that science fiction fans have infinite arguments about. But quite often you sort of hear that science fiction is things that consist of things that do not exist but could exist, or things that haven't happened but could happen, and fantasy extends into things which are really impossible as we know it based on known science. But I'm not actually sure I agree with that definition. So I prefer...
Can you repeat that by any chance, just to be clear?
Yes. So a traditional definition that you hear quite often is that in science fiction, things happen which may be very strange, but which in principle could happen, at least sort of based on our current knowledge of how the universe works. And fantasy extends to the impossible. So in fantasy, you can have things like magic, which sort of totally are at odds with our understanding of the universe. But I kind of disagree with that definition a little bit. I mean, I find that distinction somewhat artificial. And I think my definition of science fiction has much more to do with a kind of the scientific method, or you could say the science fictional method, where you try to create fictional worlds that are self-consistent. So sort of treating the story as a kind of thought experiment, where you make some assumptions and try to work out their consequences within the context of that fictional world that you're creating, and while trying to be sort of logical and somewhat rigorous, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So in that sense, I'm perfectly happy with starting sort of seemingly impossible starting points as well. I mean, usually, even in what is known as traditional science fiction, the sort of, at least the writer's heuristic is that you are usually allowed one impossible thing. So it could be faster than light travel or time travel or something like that.
That kind of preempts one of the audience questions that I received by Callum Chase, who was asking whether you are a fantasy or a sci-fi author, or if it does really even make any sense to make that distinction. And I think you mostly answered it.
No, I mean that's right. I mean, I don't think I don't think the distinction makes sense. I mean, I've written kind of stories which are closer to both ends of the spectrum. I have written pure fantasy stories based on Finnish mythology, and I have written more sort of hard science fiction style stories. But yeah, I think it all comes down to what story one wants to tell, and what is the palette that it needs to be painted in to make it most effective.
Well, I have to share with you that I myself do actually very much abide by that distinction. And I'm a fan of what some people may call more of the hard sci-fi writers, and generally almost never read or enjoy the so-called fantasy writers. And I mean, I absolutely love your book, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, your trilogy. But if there were any parts that I had to struggle with to sort of suspend disbelief and kind of get it, as it were, to be able to dive into the plot, was those elements of fantasy that I personally had to really struggle with. And yeah. But let me ask you, how did you get interested in writing in general and writing science fiction in particular? Let's embrace your definition for the purposes of our conversation and assume there's no such distinction. But how did you get interested in writing, and why sci-fi in particular?
So I guess to answer the second question first, I think the sort of fondness of science fiction really came from starting with Jules Verne when I was sort of around 6 or 7 years old, and then sort of proceeding to read H.G. Wells, and then all the sort of classic science fiction authors, whatever I could find in the local library in my hometown. So I think I think in some sense whenever we try to express ourselves and try to reach for some sort of sense of wonder, we do end up going back to childhood and childhood influences. That's something I think we all want to fundamentally recapture. On how I started writing, the story behind that is that originally I was very much into tabletop role-playing games. So when I was growing up in my hometown as a teenager, I had a group of friends who, like myself, were really into not only Dungeons and Dragons, but sort of many other types of games that usually ended up having a strong storytelling element. And I usually had the role of a game master who was kind of the world builder and facilitator of the story. So that was all very useful stuff regarding writing as well. But that was kind of my main form of creative expression when I was growing up. And then when I came to the UK, I sort of lost touch with my groups or friends in Finland, and was looking for something to fill that void in some way. And I tried other things as well. I tried amateur theatre. I spent a bit of time at the Bedlam Theatre, which is the Edinburgh University student theatre. I think my best role was playing the lead role in a play called Roberto Zucco, where I played a French psychopath serial killer, which is a lot of fun. But then I actually ended up going to a reading by a local writers group, spoken word group, which happened to include Charlie Stross, whose sort of short story Lobsters I had read previously, and I really wanted to hear him live. And sort of turned out that actually the performance of the group was excellent, not just only by Charlie, but the other members as well. So I sort of sought out the sort of host of the group, Gavin Ingalls, and asked if what the group's activities were and if they were ever taking any new members. And it turned out that the group had these monthly critique sessions where they also looked at each other's work and gave each other feedback. So I ended up going along to one of those things and submitting a story and joining the group, and have been a member of the group ever since. So over 10 years now, and I think that was kind of where I learned everything I know about writing.
Yeah, and I have to say, Charlie Stross is one of my favorite science fiction writers too. And actually, I started this blog after reading Ray Kurzweil's The Singularity is Near and Charlie Stross's Accelerando.
Very
And
good.
having read those two books, I was like so blown away that I decided to start this blog. And a couple of years later, I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Charlie on this podcast. And I was amazed that the person who wrote Accelerando was a total singularity skeptic.
Yes, he is. I
And I
know.
found that so fascinating. But it was one of my favorite interviews. Let me get back to you though. So can you perhaps tell us what is sort of the motivation or the ultimate goal of your work, other than having fun and sort of live those experiences that you mentioned, playing Dungeons and Dragons with your friends and sort of having that kind of experience?
Well, I think in terms of writing, it does become much more about exploration and trying to answer, well, not necessarily even answer, but try to ask difficult and grand questions, and that sort of relate very much to the questions that I'm fundamentally interested in. I think in the case of the Quantum Thief trilogy, those questions revolved around identity and memory and consciousness and things like that sort of what defines us, and do we have ultimately free will? Can we fundamentally change if we are dissatisfied with who we are, and things like that. Yeah, so I think those are. I think the questions change with each work, but certainly those would be the ones related to the Quantum Thief books.
There's not an overarching theme, because that kind of also relates to the definition of science fiction that each science fiction author has. You know, I've interviewed probably 10 of the best known science fiction authors of the world, and it's amazing to me that everybody has a completely different interpretation of it. One thing that's in common most of the time, with some notable exceptions, is that, as Cory Doctorow put it, science fiction is not about the future.
No.
It's about the present. And that notable exception may be Werner Vinge, who said that in his understanding, or in his sort of embracing of science fiction, it was like a mechanism through which he tries to make sense of the universe. And in that process, if he shares his ideas with other people and they thought that it makes sense, then that was great. Charlie Stross, for example, said that science fiction was about exploring the human condition under what he called was coming up with plausible lies about how human behavior would work under some kind of crazy, extreme, imaginary circumstances.
Mhm.
And so, is there nothing overarching? Or, I mean, you're maybe too young of an author to ask such a grand question about.
No, I think it is it is a very good question. I think these kinds of big overarching answers do probably emerge more easily looking back at a larger body of work than I have. But actually one thing comes to mind. I was sort of I gave a talk recently at FinCon in Finland, and actually one of the ideas that came to me while preparing for that talk was the kind of analog between fiction and science fiction in particular and spacesuits. So you could think of science fiction as a kind of a spacesuit that allows you to explore strange and sort of bizarre environments. And one incredible power that fiction has, and this I think relates to my background as in with role-playing games, is that it is the unique medium where you really get inside somebody's head, where it's not just about sort of looking at people from afar, listening to people's conversations, but it's really experiencing the inner narrative of the characters that you interact. So you actually see the world through their eyes. So you get to be in these whether they are sort of worlds of the future or some other strange and fantastical settings. So it is like you wear their skin. You put them on like a suit, and you enter a different world which allows you to see things from a different perspective.
But also in that universe, you take the sort of the role of God.
Well, I mean, I think not. I mean, yes, you could think of it that way. I mean, author, of course, the authorial role is that of a creator. I guess Tolkien even talked about sub-creation, and he kind of viewed world building as a kind of imitation of God's work as a kind of highest form. But I don't know. I mean, I think when I write, I do try to do it very much from the point of view of the characters, and therefore the sort of unexpected things happen when you look at the world through their eyes. I had an interesting conversation actually with Stephen Baxter, who I don't know if you interviewed him, but sort of who has an extremely rigorous approach to scientific world building, and I think in one of the novels that he wrote, I think it's Raft, possibly, there is a life form that evolves on the surface of a neutron star. So he did months and months of research on neutron stars and came up with all kinds of plausible sort of nucleic chemistries that could allow these life forms to exist and so on. But then he said that none of that research was as useful as sitting down and writing the first scene where the main character opens her eyes and looks around. So that's kind of the point where he entered that world himself. So you kind of wear this suit even as the author. You kind of have to explore it also from the points of view of the characters. I guess that there is then the mode where you step away from the writing process and you do this more godlike planning and try to lay out the path for the characters. But quite frequently, of course, they disobey and go their own way as well. And your mind definitely fills in details that you could not have thought of in this sort of God mode, let's say, as you start writing.
Those are very interesting insights into writing fiction that you're giving us here. So let me try and bring it to your other previous work in math and ask you, what are the similarities and the differences between writing science fiction and problem-solving a math question, or how is math helping you do science fiction, or has it, or is it?
Yeah, I think there's definitely similarities. So I think one interesting thing about mathematics is that it's sort of an art of constraints. So it's an art of imposing interesting constraints. You sort of you're kind of in mathematics you study formal systems that are defined by a set of axioms, and then you try to derive theorems from those axioms, and kind of deciding what axioms you're choosing and what you're excluding, and what kind of how do you limit the class of objects you're studying is very important. And the sort of trick is to try to find interesting constraints that actually make it give you sort of a handle on this sort of space of possible objects. And in the same way, I think in science fiction you sort of try to constrain yourself in some way. You make a change in the world, but it has to be an interesting change, and then you also try to figure out how to constrain yourself. So do you remain within sort of the confines of known science, or what do you do? I mean, I think one concrete example in the first Quantum Thief book was sort of essentially realizing that in order to write a detective story set in this fairly post-human future, there had to be some constraints that needed to be introduced. Now, first constraint I actually imposed was because I wanted to have some sort of relatable story in the sort of human sense and sense of characterization. So I chose not to have a significant element of sort of strong AI in the story in the universe of the world at all, of the books at all. So one constraint was that uploading happens before there is any strong AI, and strong AI tends to be an extremely difficult problem, and therefore it just becomes easier and more efficient to just sort of use repurposed human minds for every conceivable kind of software-based solution. So that's one thing.
Yes, yes. I'm planning to bring up that very important constraint later on in our conversation. But what you said previously about math and working with constraints kind of reminds me to a quote that I saw in one of your previous interviews, where you say creativity requires frustration and suffering.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Well, I think this is sort of actually also a process that is described very well in a book called "The Mathematician's Mind." I think there's a extended, which is a sort of a selection of essays from mathematicians who describe how they work. Where Poincaré, for example, describes that he would just essentially get to a point where he could make no progress at all with the problem, where he would then have to essentially force himself to look away from it and have this period when he wasn't necessarily consciously thinking about the problem at all, and then all of a sudden a sort of random event or would spark some new realization that would seemingly come out of nowhere. And I think what I've found is that it's, at least for me, in terms of writing, quite often I end up with some sort of plot or character related problem that I think about for a long time, and I have this feeling of totally getting stuck. And then it's sort of the challenge is how to endure that feeling long enough for the sort of spark to come from somewhere. And I've now kind of started to feel fairly confident that it usually comes in some form, but sort of so it's all about developing the patience to wait for it and allow it to happen.
And you have to build a lot of pressure to build that dam of creativity.
Absolutely,
to break through the dam of creativity before you're able to get there.
Yeah, of course you still need to have that effort needed to kind of end up pushing against the dam and then have the pressure build up, as you say. But yeah, then usually the sort of it is a very singular event, or a very sort of rapid event when it does break.
Hannu, your signing of a contract with a major publishing company is a bit of the subject of a legend. Would you mind sharing with us how is it that it happened? I mean, the story goes that you basically had 20-some double-spaced pages and you pretty much sold a trilogy.
That is true. That there is actually a version that claims that it was the first sentence, but that's not quite true. So what happened was that around 2007, I was signed on by John Jarrold, sort of famous literary agent in the UK, who already started his career as an editor, including and who's sort of authors who worked with him included Ian Banks and many other famous authors. So John sort of started gently suggesting that I should write a novel, and at that point I'd already had attempts at novel writing. So I had a sort of a 2/3 finished manuscript, which I'd been working on and off for several years, and then I sort of made this concerted effort to actually finish it. And it didn't really go anywhere. I kind of I started to feel that story had some fundamental issues that I couldn't resolve, and so eventually I sort of just put it aside and started thinking if I had any other ideas. And I sort of recently read Robert Axelrod's book, The Evolution of Cooperation, And then I had this kind of flash about a dilemma prison, a kind of simulated prison, using prisoners' dilemma to sort of evolve prisoners to altruistic cooperators, and so I started thinking about, okay, what sort of prisoners would be there, and so on, and I kind of wrote a chapter that became the first chapter of The Quantum Thief, and I thought I was quite satisfied with it, so I sent it to John just to ask his view on whether it was worth pursuing further, and he happened to have a meeting on the same day with Simon Spanton, an editor at Gollancz, and so he asked me, could he show it to Simon? And I said, of course, yes, but my expectation was that Simon might say, well, this is kind of interesting, let's see the whole thing, or maybe he wouldn't like it at all, or something like that. But instead, he sort of went out on a limb and offered us a 3-book contract based on that. So that was that was quite a shock.
That's absolutely fascinating. So, and this kind of leads me to another audience question by Cynthia Stewart, who is asking, do you have any advice for nascent sci-fi novelists? What would that be? People who are trying to break through?
To break through to the science fiction publishing industry. Now,
or in any realm for novel sci-fi writers, whether trying to break through in the publishing industry or generally about writing anything you want to. Do you think it would make the biggest difference for them?
Right. I think one thing that sort of I like to mention is that it is worth to try to write some short stories, because short stories are easier to finish than novels, and they are also a good way to attract some attention and establish yourself as a writer, and it's good. It's very good practice. As well, I guess the other piece of advice would be to try to read as widely as possible. So not just science fiction, but also very widely outside science fiction, because usually the novel things in science fiction come by taking elements also from outside. And I think one key thing in as I said earlier is sort of trying to find new ways of exploring these alien worlds, and it may be that there already are in sort of somewhere in what you might call mainstream literature or other genres. There might be points of view that are actually a very good way of approaching that. So that's something to do as well.
So read widely and write short stories.
Yeah.
Those
you can summarize that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Hannu, many people struggle with that sort of publishing breakthrough. I mean, for them, it's kind of easier to write a book. But what was the biggest challenge for you on the road to ending up with a trilogy?
I think actually, in terms of the process itself, it was figuring out what goes into a novel. So I think the immediately after getting the contract, I had a major crisis in terms of actually. Sort of going forward, I guess there was pressure and expectations, and the bar seemed very high. So I actually had a proper writer's block for a period of time. I tried to come up with this massive outline that had pretty much every idea I had ever had on to fit into even that first book, and that just sort of turned out to be too much, and it sort of took then. Quite a bit of time, and actually the help of a friend from the writers group to kind of unravel that issue and to figure out what is the natural length of a novel, what sort of story do you tell in a novel, and going through that exercise actually helped to me to realize that then that outline was the outline for the 3 books and not just one book. So that was certainly a challenge in terms of the writing process. In terms of other challenges, I think the sort of the initial getting the first story published, I think, is also a challenge. Like to get to the point where there is a long road even between starting writing and getting a first story published. I mean, that's why I again emphasize the short stories, because they allow you to do that process a little bit faster. So.
Hannu, we've been talking for a while here, and I think it's way overdue to actually jump and start discussing the meat of the matter here, which is, of course, your book. Um, Let me start by saying that I really enjoyed your book progressively. I got hooked on part one. Part two was somehow a lot harder for me to follow and or really sort of suspend disbelief in. And then part three totally blew my mind, and I was amazed. Like part three and how you pulled everything together totally blew my mind, and I was absolutely flabbergasted. So I was kind of shocked and awed and mesmerized and amazed and absolutely loved part three. But let me start by saying it seems that me and you have been inspired by the same writers, Jules Verne, Maurice Leblanc, who of course created the character of the gentleman thief, Arsène Lupin, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, Arabian Nights. So it seemed to me you kind of took elements from all my favorite books and wrote
Yes.
this sci-fi novel, which probably is one sort of insight as to why I loved it so much.
Great.
But tell us, what is The Quantum Thief about?
Um, yeah, I think the Quantum Thief is about the main character's sort of struggle to figure out who he is, or sort of it's sort of the kind of core question there was this sort of possibility of change. Are we if we don't like ourselves, can we be better ultimately? Or are we completely trapped by our past and the choices we've made, or the identities that we built for ourselves, and that's pretty much what it's about.
Yeah, and it sort of reminded me very much to this path that martial artists undertake called the Do, the way. And it's also reminded me to the quote, a very well-known quote by Bruce Lee, who said, "All knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge."
Hmm.
So your character sort of starts in this first book by not remembering much, but by missing pretty much most of his memory, and then trying to slowly build up bits and pieces and sort of rediscover who he is and what he did together with everybody
Hmm.
else.
Hmm.
And whether, as you put it, whether he can change the sort of the momentum of the past and take new actions and create a new identity for himself, which is why I thought it's so fascinating myself, and I absolutely enjoyed it. So tell us a little bit about the main characters and how you came up with them. So you have this person on this quest of self-knowledge. So do you look then for characters who can sort of help him on this way or challenge him or
Yeah, so obviously you need the sort of the now something that is worth saying about Jean Le Flambeur, the main character, is that he's of course also sort of classic trickster figure, and so a trickster also needs sort of a straight man counterpoint, and therefore we have Mieli, who is also sort of who's much more serious, who is a bit of an outsider in most of the worlds that are visited during the course of the books, who has this sort of very singular drive towards her goal, which is to sort of reunite with her lover in the and who is very much willing to do anything to reach that goal, even if it means serving sort of the needs of the Pellegrini, who's this sort of post-human goddess with her own goals and motivations. So whereas Jean, so she's very focused and driven, whereas Jean is fluid and kind of adopts different identities, and his motives aren't so clear. So that contrast obviously is very interesting. And then you sort of I think it's sort of creating characters is an organic process. So it's not necessarily just about putting pieces and points and counterpoints on the table, but sort of other characters obviously emerge who then embody the forces that they have to overcome to achieve their goals.
Hmm. And then you have another kind of important character called Perhonen, uh, which is basically a spaceship with a personality.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work? You have a spaceship which has a soul or a personality or an identity of its own.
So I guess Perhonen is like sort of all the other characters in the story, ultimately derived from a sort of human-like mind, but in this case, a human-like mind that treats sort of the spaceship as her body effectively. So it's who she really is. So it's not, she's not sort of this sort of disembodied mind haunting a spaceship. She really is the spaceship in some sense, and which sort of gives her a slightly different point of view on things than what Mieli and John have, so she's actually a little bit more reflective and sort of has maybe a higher level of self-knowledge than John and Mieli do, at least initially. So she tends to try to tell them things that they don't want to hear.
I don't even know if that makes sense, but Perkunen kind of reminded me to Marvin, Douglas Adams' Marvin. In some ways, I mean, she's a very, very different character, so I can't really, put my finger on it, but kind of had maybe similar exchanges.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, with this kind of a little bit interesting sense of humor, curious sense of humor, a spaceship with a sense of humor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think she's maybe not quite as pessimistic as Marvin is,
No.
but yeah, I think that there's sort of maybe there is some tendency in science fiction to introduce sort of artificial characters or sort of either robotic or inhuman characters who then serve as mirrors for the main characters, and the sort of their alien nature gives them a little bit of distance and perspective on what's going on. So maybe Perhonen does play that role as well.
Mm-hmm. And you said that you actually wrote the outline, or you realized that you had the outline for all three books before you even finished the first one, right? Which kind of
Yes.
makes sense, because to me, it was absolutely flabbergasting reading the third book and pulling all the strings from all those different parts together and bringing it all in a way that I totally did not foresee in any way, and totally amazed me. So it was part of this kind of amazing effect that I really enjoyed in the end. Uh, how important is outlining? Because, I mean, some people write with outlines and other people kind of follow the characters and wherever they take them.
Mm-hmm. I think you have to do well. I mean, I think everybody is very different, and in that regard, I mean, there are certainly people like, for example, I don't know, Joe Hill, who just seems to sit down and write and see where the characters take him. But for me, it's actually quite important. So I do have a kind of a long process where I just I'm not really even actively writing. I'm just thinking about things and sort of coming up with ideas, and I tend to use little sticky notes quite a lot. So I end up usually with a wall in my office covered with sticky notes that I then sort of try to assemble into sort of mind map like patterns, and I do sort of a similar exercise with each chapter before I write it. So I come up with this. I sort of throw down ideas for scenes, pieces of dialogue, pieces of description, and then I kind of cluster them into clumps, and then join them with arrows to see how it actually flow. So I do it at sort of both the macro level and closer to the story itself. But I think that does kind of, I do then tend to forget about it when I'm actually writing. So when the actual writing process starts, then it becomes more about following the characters. So I've sort of set some of these milestones that I want to reach, but then it's kind of up to working with the characters to find the way there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you use any like software program for writers or something like that?
There's quite a few things I use. I mean, there's something actually I've started using quite a lot recently is called Scapple, which is this sort of brainstorming piece of software, which is also which is made by the same guy who created Scrivener, which I do use quite a lot as well in the actual writing process. Although I write first drafts by hand.
A true mathematician.
Yes, so it may have something to do with the fact that I am very used to thinking with a pen in my hand, so it comes to me more naturally than using a keyboard. But then I type it up, and as I type it up, I also usually edit it quite a lot. So the initial handwritten draft is more like a sketch, so it's very rough, and then it gets refined in the typing process.
Let me bring in the topic here of determinism and free will.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this: before writing the book, were you a determinist or not?
I think okay. Again, we need to slightly think about what we mean by determinism. Now something. There's a great book by Daniel Dennett called "Freedom Evolves," which is about the question of free will, and I think Dennett makes a great argument that that it doesn't matter, that it's sort of that the question of whether the universe at the sort of microscopic level is deterministic or random ultimately does not influence how we would experience our freedom or lack of freedom. So, I mean, I think it seems to me that there is an essential element of randomness in quantum mechanics. So unless our understanding of quantum mechanics is completely wrong, then there is certainly a fairly strong element of randomness in the physical world. Whether there now
does random mean free?
No, it doesn't. I don't think so. So there's, I think, this sort of to think about the question of freedom, we then need to go up to the level of human cognition and the human brain, and there also the question is not completely straightforward. I mean, there is more and more evidence of from cognitive science that there are all kinds of behaviors that we have previously thought of as being voluntary, which we actually cannot consciously control. That we can actually make decisions before we are conscious of them at all, or there can be brain injuries that really force us to behave in sometimes horrible ways. I mean, there are instances where brain tumors have caused people to carry out mass shootings or sort of become pedophiles or other horrible things like that. But something that I think my kind of main reason why I do have some faith in some sort of personal notion of freedom is that the human brain is also extremely plastic. It's sort of there's
neuroplasticity.
Exactly, that there's sort of we do seem to have this enormous capacity for neuroplasticity, which means that if we kind of try to maybe sometimes using sort of artificial tools to help us, even in terms of just sort of writing down patterns of behavior that we have, and sort of try to cultivate our awareness of them, we can then actually try to hack those patterns and create new ones. And then of course there are examples of just astonishing change in terms of repurposing our senses for engaging with information in different ways. Like I think there's this example of a blind mountain climber who has a set of electrodes sort of on his tongue, coupled to a camera that he has actually taught himself to use to see effectively, and it sounds like he does genuinely experience that input as sight. So if our brains can be kind of repurposed at such a fundamental level, then I think there's some hope also for our more sort of everyday sort of interpersonal behavioral aspects as well.
Yeah, I think one of the students of Professor Kevin Warwick at the University of Reading actually was working on one of those tools that you just described, of translating vision to taste, into taste awareness. But going back to your book, perhaps one of the reasons why I really absolutely loved it, especially part 3, was that in a way, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in a way it's a polemic for free will.
Mm.
it starts with there's always a way out,
Hmm.
and it kind of ends at that kind of realm, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And is it
yeah.
fair to say then, therefore, that if there is always a way out, then you can put the argument that in a way it's a polemic for free will?
Yeah, I mean, you could say that. I mean, I'm not sure I consciously wrote it as a polemic for free will, but I think that is kind of the conclusion I reached through the writing process in sort of in terms of considering this identity question that are we trapped by who we have made ourselves to be, and yeah, I think the ultimate answer is that there is a way out.
And that leads me to my previous question again, right? Because I ask you, were you a determinist before writing the book? And then the follow-up is, of course, how did it change after writing a trilogy on the topic, or did it? Or did it just reaffirm your starting beliefs? Because it seems to me that it sort of reaffirmed your starting beliefs that we do have free will.
Yeah, I think I sort of I think I held more or less the same opinion when I started writing, but maybe it sort of put it to a test along the way, and helped me to refine my thinking. And
So now you're even stronger believer in free will.
mhm. For some definition of free will, yes. I mean, or I mean, I guess I'm a believer in the ability of human beings to change and become better.
Exactly.
So. Mhm.
As long as we're not prisoners of our past or past personas and past actions, then that to me is a pretty good definition. Um, where does transhumanism and posthumanism fit within your plot?
That's a good question.
We discovered that the singularity doesn't figure there. There's no super intelligent artificial general intelligence. So where does you mentioned mind uploading? Where does transhumanism and posthumanism come into play?
Well, I guess it's kind of ubiquitous in the setting. So it very much comes from my own fascination with the subject, the sort of possibility of sort of transcending our physical bodies, and or sort of widening the sort of space of possible forms of human existence. So I was sort of when I was studying at university in the sort of from I guess 1997 onwards, I kind of started reading transhumanist writers, and then sort of both in terms of fiction and non-fiction, and became very fascinated by that
Give me
kind of
some
thinking.
examples, please.
So I guess maybe probably the first people I might have encountered around that time would have been Anders Sandberg, and his sort of writings online, and then sort of Marvin Minsky and Hans Moravec and that crowd. Yeah, I think Hans Moravec's book Mind Children was quite a strong influence. I was quite blown away.
Of those three you mentioned, Hans is the only person I haven't interviewed on this.
Right. Cool. And yeah, so then obviously on the science fictional side there were people like Werner Vinge and Charlie and so on. Sort of I think I then kind of also expanded to philosophers who kind of had worked on things that were related, like Douglas Hofstadter and Daniel Dennett and
Max Moore, perhaps?
not sure. Well, I'm sure I must have read something by Max Moore as well. Oh, and Robin Hanson as well was sort of. I think the kind of upload economics thinking in the Quantum Thief books was very strongly influenced by him.
I'm sorry to hear that. The biggest disagreement I've ever had with somebody on my show was with Robin Hanson.
No. I think again, sort of the caveat I always have to make in terms of a lot of the not necessarily the sort of thematic elements, but the sort of actual details of technology and economics in the Quantum Thief series are much more about creating a framework for telling the interesting story than necessarily reflecting what I genuinely think about the future or transhumanism. I think I sort of there was maybe a period when I did this. This is maybe I must say that I have probably been also influenced a lot by conversations with Charlie on these topics. I started to feel also that at least in some branches of transhuman and posthuman or singularitarian thinkers, there was maybe a little bit too much of sort of pseudo-religious fervor for my liking, and that sort of that then made me also try to think more about what would be the more negative implications or scarier scenarios of what might arise with mind uploading and so on. Oh, I should mention that I did also read quite a lot of the writings of Eliezer Yudkowsky at one point, which I was very fascinated by.
Let me ask you then, because you mentioned that you sort of perceived some kind of religious fervor when it came to the singularity. I mean, others have called it rapture of the nerds. Jaron Lanier called it the Church of Robotics, and so on. So what's your take on the technological singularity?
I think the sort of maybe I kind of still am more fascinated by sort of Vernor Vinge's definition of singularity as this kind of
event horizon.
Event horizon, precisely, the point beyond which we cannot predict. But sort of it does make me. I sort of find it a bit problematic to think that there is this sort of one singularity, that there is a singular singularity, if you like, that the sort of emergence of super intelligence is inevitable, or that there is this very definitive end point to all this that we're heading towards. But whereas to me it seems more like the sort of, it's a bit like this multiversal explosion we were talking about earlier, that the sort of space of possible paths is constantly expanding, and there is this event horizon before us in the I guess sort of only 2 or 3 decades now, beyond which it becomes very hard to see what's happening.
Yeah, I can empathize with that, because there's a lot of people in the community that kind of see this kind of manifest destiny, this kind of teleological sort of fulfillment, if you will, in the reaching of the singularity. But I personally don't share that myself, and I like to consider it, like you, as one of those sort of future scenarios, even though I would say it's a very possible, highly probable scenario in my estimate. But going back to that kind of criticism of the idea of the singularity, I think it's one of the reasons why Charlie Strauss, for example, in his conversation, he said that elegant ideas that explain everything are usually wrong. And another one of my favorite sci-fi authors, Carl Schroeder, he said that the singularity is a lens to look at the future, but it's only one of many lenses that you can take on and sort of glance forward and see what comes up next. So I think those two people have had profound effect on the way I perceive it personally. But speaking of religious fervor, let me ask you, are you religious in any way yourself?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I sort of quite frequently I have the same relationship with religion that I have with football. I mean, I appreciate the fact that a lot of people get very excited about it, but I somehow don't quite understand what's going on. Now, I mean, it's not to be down on either religion or football, but I mean, so. I mean, I do kind of I have had experiences of what you might call sublime, or the kind of
have you? Please share.
I mean, in terms of I would say in terms of sort of very beautiful things, or experience things that relate to experiencing nature, or experiencing something very deep and profound in mathematics or science, where usually it's associated with suddenly sort of seeing lots of connections between seemingly unconnected things, or just being overwhelmed by the vastness of something. So I think that is probably close to some sort of religious experience. I don't know if I'm sure we could now try to actually. I think in fact there has been a recent attempt to quantify how mathematicians experience mathematics. So there was a brain imaging experiment where I think it was shown that mathematicians literally find beautiful equations beautiful. So the same regions of their brain activate as they would be looking at a beautiful painting or something like that. But I am fascinated by religion, and even perhaps more fascinated than by organized religion. I'm fascinated by mythology. So I am very intrigued by all the sort of complex systems of narrative and story that we have created over time. And I'm sort of, again, sort of, I guess my influences are obvious, that I kind of, I'm interested in the ideas of Dennett and others of religion as a kind of self-replicating meme complex that sort of can be understood from a sort of semi-biological point of view. But yeah, as in terms of having sort of personal religious views, I don't really have any.
Mm-hmm. And that's naturally one of the reasons why you sort of tend to avert from the singularity as a sort of somewhat of a religious meme.
Maybe. I mean, there's also, I think, lately, especially, I've been reading quite a lot about the history of kind of similar ideas in the past. I think something that comes up already in the Quantum Thief books is the philosophy of Nikolai Fedorov in sort of the Russian cosmism movement. And more recently, I've been reading about a very strange character called John Murray Spear, a spiritualist who was very active in the 1850s in New England, who basically, in his thinking, you have the kind of same kind of entanglement of sort of the possibility of immortality, sort of utopian social reform, the sort of overwhelming power of technology. And he kind of already paints a picture of a kind of technological singularity in the 1850s. And it's sort of, I don't know, I mean, looking at sort of the previous iterations of the singularity meme, if you like, or the rapture meme, whatever it is sort of hard not to be a little bit cautious that are we not just, I mean, of course there are many things that are different today than in the 1850s, but it's sort of hard not to be a little bit cautious by saying that, okay, are we really different from people of that time and the way they were perhaps lured by the same biases.
Samuel Butler is another great example of the same age with his book Erehorn.
Yes, absolutely. That's I've been looking into that as well. So Darwinian evolution amongst machines. Yeah, I mean, no, it's sort of remarkable how many sort of truly seemingly modern ideas you can find in the 19th century and even before. I mean,
Hannu, let me throw in here the last question that I have about the fractal, about the Quantum Thief trilogy, and it's an audience question, and then we're going to unfortunately have to move on to the concluding couple of questions that I have for you. So this is a question submitted to me by David Roschek, and he says this. At the end of the Fractal Prince, Mealy is shot from the disintegrating Perhunen into space and finds herself near the Zoku jewel, which previously Chen has been in possession of. Where does that Zoku jewel come from? And then the follow-up is, in an interview, you alluded to the Finnish version being better because you discovered and fixed a plot hole. Was this the plot hole or was it something else?
So that wasn't the plot hole. The plot hole was something else. But so to answer this Zoku jewel question, so it's not the jewel that Matic Chen has. So it's the jewel, it's the rainbow Zoku jewel that Mieli and Jean use in some of the early chapters to hack into this Zoku router, and it's actually from Mars. So Jean stole it from one of the Martian Zoku members, sort of in the previous book. So it's yeah, I think it is explained where it comes from. So that's the jewel.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was my recollection of the facts, but somehow or similar to that anyway. Was it in one of the rooms of that sort of prison where he was fighting with his other self, the gardener, and was kind of running out, and he sort of picked it up from a box?
No, there is a he picks up the Schrödinger box in that scene, but there is a sort of a very brief flashback scene in one of the early Fractal Prince chapters that has to do with Pixel's resurrection party, and John has a conversation with one of the Martian Zoku members, and then he steals one of his Zoku jewels, so which is this rainbow jewel that they then use.
Fantastic, excellent. Okay, so I hope David is happy with this clarification. Now, let me ask you, what's next for Hannu Rajaniemi? Tell us a little bit about your next book or your next work. You already shared the sort of the biotech, nanotech company that you're becoming part of as a project at SU. What other things do you have on the horizon? You said you're working on a new book. Can you share something about that with us?
Yeah, certainly. So it is kind of related to some of the themes that I already alluded to. So effectively, it's taking the idea of it's playing this game of what we also talked about of taking some assumptions and deriving consequences from them, even if those assumptions are quite fantastical. And in this case, the assumptions are that some of the stranger ideas of the 19th century spiritualists turn out to be true. So we have a world where interaction, very direct interaction with the afterlife is possible, and a completely alternative technology around that possibility gets developed with very profound sort of effects on obviously how history unfolds and what happens to human society. Yeah, it's really sort of came from the observation that actually in the 19th century, or late 19th century especially, so many new things were happening in science that it was kind of hard to separate the strange ideas from quite realistic ideas. And there was this backlash against Darwinism. So it seemed to the 19th century philosophers and scientists that Darwin's theory kind of took away the possibility of God, and with the possibility of God, sort of the foundation of morality and ethics. If there was sort of no afterlife punishment, it was sort of this early existential crisis, if you like.
Those were just some of them, and those were mostly the more religious ones, because to me that was one of his greatest accomplishments.
No. I mean, I'm not arguing against that, but it's just how I mean, obviously, religion was much more pervasive in society at the time than it is today, and so then the conclusion was that a lot of very serious thinkers, including sort of physicists like William Crookes and many others, started to consider the possibility that could there be some sort of scientific explanation of the afterlife, which would actually incorporate Darwin's evolutions in some way. A guy called Frederick Myers, one of the founders of the Society for Psychic Research, actually came up with a framework where Darwinian evolution kind of continues in the afterlife, where there is this sort of evolution after death, and where souls actually kind of become more advanced than they were in life, and that actually there are these super intelligences beyond on the other side that then actually he believed were trying to make contact with humanity and trying to give humanity tools to improve themselves. And there are some absolutely crazy historical figures that turn up. So, for example, there was together with Myers, there was one of Britain's prime ministers, Arthur Balfour, and a group around him were convinced that these super intelligent spirits were trying to instruct them in creating a vessel for a perfect engineered soul from the afterlife that these spirits wanted to inject into our world to kind of act as a savior or a messiah, and they took this so seriously that Balfour's brother had an affair with a high society woman to actually produce this vessel, who in our world sort of turned out to be relatively normal, but not necessarily in the book that I'm working on. And there are also other interesting threads. I mentioned John Murray Spear. so a little bit earlier in New England. And him and his friends actually tried to build a thing they called the new motor, which was some sort of machine messiah, actually. So they were, or sort of a combination of an artificial intelligence and a perpetuum mobile. So a source of infinite energy, but also a sentient artificial being that was also supposed to be self-replicating. And in Speer's writings and sort of writings of the contemporaries, it is described in some detail as being this complex mechanical system made out of a combination of exotic gems and minerals that can be programmed by thought. And they really do describe the process of trying to get it to work in terms of the people working on creating it as imprinting their thoughts onto this device in a very sort of well-defined way, and it's sort of hard not to interpret it as some sort of process of programming. So yeah, and clearly the sort of creation of this machine was going to lead to a kind of a singularity.
Very interesting. I mean, of course, I'm kind of a little skeptical about that whole exploration about the afterlife and so on, but why not? Perhaps I should be a little more open-minded about that too. And the previous example, by the way, that you gave kind of reminded me a little bit to one of the former prime ministers of Canada, Mackenzie King.
Oh, interesting.
Who said once that his best advisor was his mom, and major decisions of his life were taken after consulting with his mom. For example, Canada's participation in World War II and all that. See, the only problem was that his mom has been dead for a decade.
I see.
So, so he kept consulting her for many, many years about major policy decisions after she's been dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, but just to elaborate on that a little bit, I mean, the reason why I've kind of chosen this approach rather than sort of more hard science fictional approach, I think is that I do find it, as I said, very, very fascinating how how closely some of these ideas resemble modern ideas, and it is sort of interesting then to take our conceptions of death and afterlife and sort of project them against this backdrop of history, and take some of these seemingly crazy ideas that these people had, and try to see what would have been the logical conclusion had they actually been true. So it's sort of an interesting toy box to play with.
And I know for a fact that you do have the skills and the tools to make it a very interesting experience, and probably one that I would undertake as soon as the book comes out. Hannu, we've been talking for about 90 minutes by now, and unfortunately our interview has to come to an end. I have to let you go and focus on your more productive activities, such as writing. But my usual two questions are these. The first one is, what's the best place for people to find more about you and your work?
So I think actually at the moment I have not that much online presence. So I mostly tweet, but yeah, I think the best way is probably through my books. So there are the Quantum Thief books, and I also have a short story collection coming out next year, which will sort of compile some of my shorter fiction from the past few years together. So I think those are probably the best place to start.
I want to ask you if there's a single thing that you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from this long conversation with you. What would you like that to be? What do you think is the most important message you want to send out?
Let me think about that for a moment.
Yeah, of course. We touched on a very, very wide variety of topics. So you choose what you want to focus our attention on as a parting message.
I think the first thing that does come to my mind is really sort of embracing the power of fiction to wear somebody else's skin and look through somebody else's eyes does give us this power to explore worlds that do not exist but perhaps could exist, and yeah, ask very big and grand questions, and sort of, if not completely answer them, at least sort of understand better why we ask those questions in the first place. So yeah, self knowledge through looking through other people's eyes is probably kind of one of the things that is very important for me, at least on the sort of fictional side of things that I do. So yeah.
I think that's actually a fantastic point to end our interview at. And I just want to remind to our viewers and listeners who have been sticking around for this 90 minutes that the first and best quotes that they tweet from this interview within the next week or so, and or share under the YouTube video, the first 3 would receive a copy of your book, The Kozo Angel. So let's see who would be the lucky ones.
Great.
Hannu Rajaniemi, thank you very much for spending so much time with us today. Really appreciate it.
It's been a great pleasure, and thank you very much.